The Outriders Worldslayer expansion has brought 2 new sets to each class, along with dozens and dozens of new legendary items. Now this has brought new ways of improving old builds as well as creating brand new builds. You've probably already seen the new Earthquake build out there kicking butt. Well, today I'm here to share with you the new and improved AP Vlad the Impaler build. When you're ready to AOE impale the masses while also being no slouch when it comes to boss clears, this is the build for you. Check out the footage right now, followed by all the build information. If you find this entertaining and helpful, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them in the comments below. Do note, when it comes to numbers, they are gonna vary depending on what apocalypse tier you are on. So mainly what you want to be looking at here is how quickly things die. Alright, enjoy this footage and I'll see you on the flip side. But as always, we're going to start with the skills, and the most important skill is Impale, as this is an Impale build. And Reflect Bullets is also going to be very, very important functionally here. Now, Tremor, you're going to see we're going to use it in a functional manner. We're not going to buff it up with any mods, but it's going to be there to apply an initial bleed. Little AOE healing as well doesn't hurt. And because we have all these seismic abilities with high cooldown rates, this is going to be pretty good. I could see somebody using Golem or even Gravity Leap potentially, but you're probably not going to need the Golem for survival, and we're not going to have room for mods to do like double jump, etc. So Gravity Leap, you may not be getting the bang for the buck that you would hope for with it. Now let's talk about skill tree. And so when we're talking about the main passive skill tree, it's pretty much a pure seismic shift build. So you're going to see, very important, we get protection here. I also like to get Stone Circle to increase that close range from a baseline 10 meters up to 14 meters. So this is nice. We're going to be doing a lot of healing through bleeding, so blood donation is big. We want to pump up our armor for survivability if protected by anomaly. And then the only area where we're kind of double dipping on both parts of the rows here is we're getting both Endless Tremor as well as Rejuvenation. Otherwise, we just want to get as much AP as possible. Packs tree, we're also going very, very mainstream here. So we're getting Impact Point. We're going to be getting Puncture. Again, big thing here. All seismic skills inflict bleed. And we're doing extra anomaly damage to anything that's bleeding. We're leaning very heavily into bleed damage here. Of course, the best node probably of all, Earthen Shell for survivability. And then both Upheaval as well as Multi-Strike is going to help us out because we're going to be spamming our Impale quite a bit. Now let's quickly talk about Ascension levels. So we definitely want to get 10 out of 10 Anomaly Power as well as Anomaly Damage. I then went for Resistance Piercing, then Cooldown Reduction. I haven't maxed it out yet, but Damage Against Elites is going to be next. After that, I'm probably going to go with Magazine Size, and after that, you can go for Skill Leech, and then you could technically go Status Power. You can do more bleed damage at higher levels. But the starting ones are the ones you're seeing here. Now the big thing here is gear. And I want to put a caveat here. I have experimented with both the new Banner Lord set, which basically with 3 out of 3 makes it so that you get insane cooldown for your Impale. And I have run it this way. It basically makes it so you have no cooldown on Impale, but you are sacrificing a lot of damage. So basically, after getting some gear, I did change my mind, and I went back to getting the Seismic Commander set. That extra 50% damage to bleeding is just so very, very powerful. So that's what I'm leaning towards right now. Even though we're going to have some downtime on Impale, it's okay because you're going to sometimes be running around and you can still swap weapons and do other things to do damage while Impale is on cooldown. Fortunately, we have a lot of cooldown reduction, so you're not going to really have that much issues when it comes to cooldown. In fact, you saw here we have a 12.4 second cooldown on Impale, which is not bad at all. Now I'm going to do things a little backwards here. We're going to look at the armor first, and then we'll go back to the weapons and options, because there's some different things you can do there. Now when it comes to the actual armor, we are going to be going again for 3 out of 3 on Seismic Commander. We're going to start with the Seismic Commander helmet. The thing I want to note, the third mods, again, as you see them across these armors, we don't really care what piece we get them on because it's so random. We just want to make sure we get these specific ones that are noted. You can also interchange them with the mods that are modified. So in here, mod 2. So for example, if this rolled with Captain Hunter, you could put Tainted Blood in slot 2 as an example. So we do like Ultimate Impaler here. This allows us to use Impale 3 times. And again, Captain Hunter, 16% extra damage against elites, and Tainted Blood, 16% extra damage against bleeding targets. Do note, recently all of these got nerfed. Anything that did like 25% extra damage against elites, against bleeding, against toxic, etc., is now down to 16. And anything that was a 15% baseline is now down to 8%, as you'll see. Now we continue the Seismic Commander armor. Now, I got Bloody Boost on this as a bonus, which is that 8% boost. This is not bad because we're leaning into bleeding so much. I actually wouldn't mind if I got the roll to have 1 extra use of Impale. So it would be 4 instead of 3. So if you get that, I wouldn't be too sad. But Bloody Boost of all of the different modifications, this is a pretty darn good one and the best tier 2 one you can get. Again, Palisades is big. Being able to strike 2 more targets. You're going to be hitting 3 targets every time you Impale, and we're going to be casting this 3 times in a row. And then Shredder. You can't sleep on this one because enemies not killed by the skill are hit with a second spike after 0.5 second delay, dealing 50% of the damage dealt by the first spike. So again, this can potentially proc off the 3 times 3 elements up to 9 times right there, but it gets even wonkier, as you'll see in just a second. Now we are going to pick up a piece of the martial armor. This is martial waistcloth. I like the fact that it comes with power assimilation. Now we rolled the Vlad's Grasp. Vlad's Grasp, even though it's a tier 1 mod, is absolutely mandatory for this build. It's going to increase the skill range for Impale by 100%. It's going to let you cast Impale almost across the entire map of your visibility. Very, very important, especially since we're trying to hit multiple targets as often as possible. Without this mod somewhere on your build, this is a no-go. And then, of course, we are going to put Euthanizer here. Now, this is because we're going to be using a weapon that does let us apply toxic damage. If for whatever reason you don't have a weapon like that or you don't want to lean into that, feel free to get rid of Euthanizer. If you want to go a little bit more vanilla, just stick to blood scaling and then maybe add an extra proc, extra use of Impale. This is a place where you can put it. But again, can't really sleep on 16% damage here. That's really, really good the way it scales. For gloves is the other reason why Impale is so powerful in this expansion. We have post-mortem. This is ridiculous. Enemies killed by the skill generate up to 3 additional spikes, impaling enemies within a 5-meter radius from the killed enemy. This is for full damage. Remember, every time we cast it, 3 spikes go out. And so if any of those kill an enemy, it keeps spreading. If those enemies do not get killed, they pulse for an extra 50% damage half a second later. And then if that kills them, well, this procs. And then of course you can cast this and do this process 3 times before cooldowns. So post-mortem is what makes Impale viable now in this expansion, and it makes it at least competitive with the Earthquake build. Now Arms and Anomaly is ridiculous the way it scales. As you can see here, a level 61 gear, it's already at 170, almost 173,000 anomaly power, and all you gotta do is crit once. It's bonkers. It's really, really good. I threw on Anomaly Echo as well. That's an extra 102,000 anomaly power that's going to be up pretty much 24/7 since you're spamming abilities. This is a great way to multiply and get your anomaly power to very, very high levels. And then finally, we get the third piece of the Seismic Commander footgear. Sharpened Spikes increases the base impale damage by a ton, over 500,000 base. And then River of Blood increases the skill damage by 30% by enemies afflicted with blood. This is actually why you want to activate Tremor, especially on elites and bosses first. So use Tremor to apply the bleed, and then you already have bleed on all of the elites and big bosses, and then you get the full damage of the impales. Now this has led me to, even at level 61, which isn't anywhere near max, having my impale hit, or when it comes to the third progression of impales, over 43 million. And remember, that could theoretically hit multiple targets at that kind of damage level. So this ends up hitting like a Mack truck because of this combination. Now Equator, don't sleep on this ability. Notice what it does. It says damage blocked by reflect bullets is released as a damaging anomaly disc that rotates around the player. Damage dealt is increased dependent on the amount of damage blocked by the skill. So part of the strategy here is when your impales are on cooldown, you put up your reflect, and that of course if anybody shoots you is going to absorb damage, and any enemies that try and melee attack, they get pushed back. But now you're going to absorb those bullets, and it's going to create these discs, and you can basically run through enemies. You're basically invincible, and then while waiting on impale to come off a cooldown, but you can still be doing damage. So this is really, really good. Again, it's something that you could theoretically, if you get a really good roll, swap out if you want just something that directly increases the damage of your impale. Now finally, let's talk about weapons. You're going to be running around and casting a bunch of impale. So what I like to have is just a fire and forget weapon to start with. I happen to get Air to the Desert. And what's nice about this is it has Sandstorm, and for me it rolled with Slashing Twisters, which are basically AOE tornadoes that spawn, and I put Firestorm on here. So this is like Nature's Call, as I like to call it, because you shoot this, the cooldown is between 5 and 10 seconds on all these abilities. You hit it on any elite, you target any elite, and all of these are AOE, and all of them do a ton of damage. So you can fire and forget, shoot it once, and then focus on your skill use. Now, when you are actually going to go against an elite or a boss that doesn't die instantly, you can go ahead and cast this on them and then swap over to your secondary weapon. Now, if you're gonna go with a toxic setup, you want something that applies toxic. So there's a lot of options you can use to get there. I got Lucky Jinx because it comes with Ultimate Toxic Bullet, and it also rolled with Mage's Rage. We want Mage's Rage for bosses, because you're going to, again, shoot something, crit something 5 times, or 4 times rather, and it's going to give you 40% anomaly power boost and last 15 seconds. So this is phenomenal. And then I put Fortress on here for an additional 20% damage and also the defensive boost. Pretty much all of the abilities and mods that gave you a flat damage boost have been nerfed into the ground, including Omen, which was best in slot in beta. Now only applies 10% damage boost, and it only lasts for 4 seconds, so it's not very good comparatively. So this is one way to do it. Now in a perfect world, I actually am looking for an Emerald Chaos, as long as I can get the bonus mod to roll as either Fortress or Mage's Rage. This is because I love Noxious Spawn, mainly because it's going to help spread the toxic to multiple enemies, not just the boss. It gives you the debuff. You can constantly cast this, and on top of the toxic, it also gives you that damage from the actual missiles that it fires. So I overall think that that would be a better setup than the Lucky Jinx. Now, if you don't want to go with the whole toxic theme and you don't have Euthanizer on your gear, then you can go with Final Penance as one option. So this is just to boost as much damage as possible against bosses. And so here it comes with Mage's Rage. You need it to roll with either Omen or Fortress, and of course apply the opposite to there so you get this 3 combo. Do note Omen got a huge nerf. It used to be 30% damage boost, now it's 10%. But for us, it's still great because it applies bleed and does good damage that pierces through walls and through enemies, applies to a lot of targets. I'm not a huge fan that the 10% damage boost only lasts 3 seconds. That's a bit of a bummer. But what's nice about this is if you don't want to use Tremor, for example, and you want to have a way to apply bleed before you start impaling, well, this is one good way to do it. You could also alternatively get the Mythos. I don't have an example here that's rolled well, but Mythos is basically the gun that comes with Omen, and then you just have the opposite here. So you would need it to roll with either Mage's Rage or Fortress in the 3rd slot, and you use this same combination of 3 mods. So this is the gun you swap up over to as soon as you're fighting any tough mobs. The rest of the time, just run around with your Arrow of the Desert, or again, pick any weapon that's Fire Forget, whether you get Shadow Comet, any other mod that you can spam without having to crit, without having to really worry about kills. One shot, get it off on an enemy so it does damage, and then swap over to your skill rotation. All right, finally, I'm going to show you kind of the rotation for this when it comes to a boss fight. When you're fighting trash, really all you're doing is dropping down Tremor, impaling, and then when Impale is on cooldown, you can go ahead and cast Reflect. But when you're fighting the boss, you're going to notice you're going to engage with your Arrow of the Desert. Then you're going to go ahead and swap over to the secondary gun, and you're going to hit Reflect, turn it on and turn it off. That's going to give you 10 seconds of that Paladin buff. With your secondary gun, you're going to crit the enemy 4 times to max out Mage's Rage. And as soon as that happens, you're good to go. Impale 3 times in a row against the boss. As soon as that's done, swap back over to your primary weapon. Shoot the boss again with that primary weapon. So you're going to have the Flame Strike, the Sandstorm, etc. Whatever your kind of Fire and Forget effects are. Then you can swap back over to the secondary. You may bust out Reflect or Tremor, and you're basically just waiting a couple of seconds while Impale is back and ready to go, and repeat that whole process. So make sure before you cast your Impales, you are hitting Reflect for that Paladin buff, and then make sure that Mage's Rage is maxed out, and then you're good to go. If things are chaotic, you can always just forget the Mage's Rage buffs and just bust out your Impales. They're still going to hit like crazy, but they're not going to hit as hard as having that 40% anomaly power buff. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this AP Devastator build, Vlad the Impaler 2.0. If you did, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, let me know in the comments what you thought about the build. If you have any alterations or recommendations for different weapons and setups, let me know. If as I approach max level, I find new combinations of gear or better weapons to suit this, I may make an updated video as well. But until that time comes, make sure to again hit that notification bell to be notified when new build videos drop. Thank you for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.